The Stafford County Planning Commission. If you would please rise for the invocation by myself and the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. English. Lord, thank you for the many blessings that we have for our family, friends, and the ability to influence decisions in our governments. May we appreciate them and work to make each other's lives better. Please be with those who are in need, those who are ill, especially with the families that are tending them. Be with our military members who are in service as well as their families as they are in harm's way. Please be with our local emergency services, personnel, sheriff, fire, rescue, and aid in them in all the work they do to help other people's lives. And as we head to the 4th of July weekend, please let us remember and appreciate all of those who endeavored to work for us and those who have made our blessings that this country endures. Thank you and amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. English. At this point in time, we have our roll call, so Ms. Bailey?
Mr. Apicella?
Here.
Ms. Fanucci?
Here.
Mr. English?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Rhodes?
Here.
Chairman Cohen?
Here.
And myself here. Mr. Cohen, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Now we move to any declarations or disqualifications that any members may have with any item on the agenda. Seeing none, we move onward. At this point, we have asked if there's any changes to the agenda. I haven't heard of any ahead of time. So now we have presentations by the public. The public is allowed to come forward to speak. They have the opportunity to speak on any item at this point that is not one of the several public hearings that we have this evening. When you come up to the microphone, please state your name and your address. As you start speaking, the green light will turn on, which means that you have 3 minutes to speak. At the yellow light, it indicates that you have 1 minute left, and at the red light, we ask that you wrap up your comments. So if anybody would like to speak, if they'll come forward at this time.
Hello, my name is Gregory Daniel Gavin, live at 242 Stony Hill Road out in Hartwood. Back in May 10th of 2017, the council, this committee passed Resolution R 1764, which is a rather obscure ordinance regarding external lighting ordinances. I'd like to address some concerns I have with the resolution. After you've passed it, there were some disturbing facts that I just wanted to present. I'd like to review from my last statements, if we could start. There was 3 misstatements made. Jeff,
Computer,
you just go to
please.
that title page possibly. There was Ms. Blackburn's misstatement. I'm not going to go into it again because I already went into it last time. Mr. Hamilton's statements about public lighting had nothing to do with the private lighting I was talking about. I kind of reviewed that as a misstatement. I really didn't like the dismissal of Mr. Dayton's letter. Mr. Harvey and I had been using that letter as the law for the past 2 years. It's a way to settle a rather modest argument. Turns out it unfolded all to this. It started with a small complaint that I filled out about, like I said, an obscure ordinance that I really didn't even know much about until I kind of got a little feedback from Mr. Harvey's department. But anyways, if we can go to the next slide, please. This is the letter that Mr. Dayton expressed the law, which is 0.5 lumens. You chose to raise the external ordinance by tenfold. I questioned that. I was unsuccessful in talking out of it. Ms. Blackburn was very successful in showing you that we really need these bright lights out in the country and in my backyard. I really don't know. These are commercial value lightings that you've just installed in residential. I was just trying to ask you all, or I'll ask the Board of Supervisors, the next vote in August, that we really need residential lighting, we need commercial lighting. They're 2 separate things for obvious reasons. But if we can go to the next slide, please. This is what you voted for. That's really bright. I don't know how much, that would be the edge of the property on my property. If you look at the shadows, that's horribly bright. Next slide, please. There were problematic words aimed at and pointed at. If I just read, these lights in the picture there, these lights demonstrate problems with the word aimed at and pointed at. They were described as pointed down. They were described as pointed down by a Stafford County official, then they were described as pointed up by a more senior official. The light shines in my bedroom window on the second floor. It is pointed up. The lights are in violation of County Code 2087, light trespass, trying to stand up for the rights of people not shining lights on my property. The law was never enforced. Aimed at is a subjective word. It's a poor word, unenforceable word, an argumentative word. Serves no purpose at all. If I can go to the next slide quickly. These lights are pointed down. They're not in light trespass. Next slide, please. The lights are on my property. I don't want them there. The law says they shouldn't be there. It didn't work out. If I go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. I went to Walmart to find out what Walmart has. Right there at their property line. They have .20. You've just voted to raise the property lighting limits in my backyard 250% above this. I was just asking that the Board of Supervisors votes no on Resolution 1764. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to come and speak about any item that is not on the agenda for a public hearing? Seeing none, I will wrap up the public comments, and now we go to our public hearings, and so I will turn it over to Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the first presentation, we'll recognize Mr. Googe.
Good evening, Mr. Gooch.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. First presentation tonight is for a conditional use permit for a Panda Express on Garrisonville Road. This conditional use permit, as I said, is for Panda Express with a drive-through facility within the Highway Corridor Overlay Zoning District. The zoning district of the parcel is B2 Urban Commercial without proffers, and the property consists of 0.69 acres. The applicant is Janice Morris of Panda Restaurant Group, and the primary contact is Ryan Ferrogi. The site's located on the north side of Garrisonville Road, 200 feet east of Dunn Drive. It's now the location of a vacant KinderCare daycare center, which is a 4,900 square foot single-story building. It has playgrounds on the side and parking up front. There are two entrances currently to this site on Garrisonville Road. The site slopes downward gradually from Garrisonville Road, and all surrounding properties are zoned B2 with a restaurant on each side. There's offices to the east. There's commercial shopping center to the south across from Garrisonville Road. And also there's an inter-parcel access that stubs into the property here. The generalized development plan depicts a single-story restaurant, 2,229 square feet in size, with Panda Express as the sole tenant. The 2 points of access for the proposed site include access from Garrisonville Road, where the 2 existing entrances will be consolidated into a single entrance. And at the north end of the property, that stub interparcel connection they're proposing to connect to, that's a full-service connection, and it will provide access to Worth Avenue. The parking spaces are located on the east and north ends of the building. The dumpster pad and loading area are located at the northwest corner of the building, and they would be screened from view by the building and by fencing from Garrisonville Road. And a single lane drive-through circles the building in a counterclockwise direction. The main intent of the CUP is to ensure that the drive-through traffic does not have a negative impact on the highway corridor. The drive-through window for this is located on the southern side of the building with a stacking lane that begins at the farthest point from the entrance to Garrisonville Road. So the drive-through entrance is here, the order sign is here, and a bypass lane also runs parallel to the drive-through lane. So vehicles utilizing the drive-through would be required to circle around the building counterclockwise. This design allows for stacking lengths of 150 feet without vehicles blocking any internal drive aisles or parking spaces. And if vehicles do happen to stack beyond 150 feet, impacts would be only on internal travelways, not the highway corridor. And as noted before, the interparcel access from Worth Avenue provides another access point in and out of the sites. Although vehicles in this layout would be facing oncoming traffic on Garrisonville Road, the required 3-foot berm and landscaping along the road should prevent any glare issues from the use. And also the site sits slightly below the grade of Garrisonville Road, so that'll help as well. A typical restaurant use with a drive-through would generate approximately 1,600 vehicles per day. Uses generating over 1,000 vehicles per day require a TIA. However, for several reasons, staff did not require a TIA for this application. The first being that the vehicles per day for the specific use would be less than the cited averages because there would be no breakfast served. And hours of operation per the proposed condition would be limited between the hours of 10 a.m. and midnight. Also, left turn movements would be prohibited out of the site since there is a raised median along Garrisonville Road. Lastly, the nearest intersection is already signalized. VDOT has reviewed this plan and believes the site layout provides more than enough vehicle stacking to avoid impacts on Garrisonville. The proposed building design is shown here. Since the site is located in the Highway Corridor Overlay District, buildings must conform to the Neighborhood Design Standards Plan. The proposed design incorporates several architectural guidelines from the NDS plan, including variation in parapet wall height, use of synthetic wood and architectural concrete masonry on the facade, variations in facade materials, use of low reflectance and subtle earth tone colors, and recess and projections along the facade.
Mr. Gooch?
Yes, sir.
Just real quickly, because I know you sent back some answers to the questions I did, but I couldn't open that, or it didn't get through to me. But the building, the restaurant is only going to be one story, even though the picture gives the impression of it having a second story. It's really just one story, and that's just maybe a cathedral ceiling.
That's correct. I expect it's most likely due to high ceilings within the restaurant and the parapet walls. But perhaps the applicant can speak more to that about why, if it's purely just aesthetic that it's so tall, or if there's some other purpose for it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Proposed conditions include that the development will be in conformance with the GDP. Hours of operation will be limited between 10 a.m. and midnight. Site access to Garrisonville Road is limited to the single location shown on the GDP. The interparcel access is required prior to issuance of occupancy permit. The building design will conform to the provided rendering, and dumpster enclosures shall consist of masonry materials with type and color similar to the primary building. Staff finds that this is consistent with the land use recommendations of the comprehensive plan, consistent with the established development patterns. The building design is consistent with the NDS plan, and the proposed conditions will help mitigate impacts and finds no apparent negative impacts. And finally, we recommend approval with the proposed conditions. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Gooch? Ms. Vanucci?
One quick question, and you did mention this, but I just wanted to clarify to make sure I understood it 100% accurately. So currently, there are 2 entryways off of Garrisonville Road to get into what used to be the daycare, correct?
That's correct.
And the proffer statement says that it's going to be limited to 1 access, so the second entryway will be closed?
That's correct.
Okay, that was my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, thank you. And so now, we normally ask the applicant if they'd like to speak.
Good evening, members of the commission. Ryan Ferrugi, engineer, Bagby Ferrugi Good Pasture, resident Stafford County, 113 Columbus Cove. Brian, thank you for the presentation, very thorough. I'll just run through the highlights real fast. He's covered more than enough. But just wanted to run through the CUP is for a drive-through only. It's an existing zone piece of property with an existing building. The Panda Express, obviously, they will be there for a drive-through. They will, in order to work with the drive-through configuration, we did decide to close two entrances, close one of the entrances to combine them into one. We will provide the access, interparcel access to the back. As Brian said, VDOT's reviewed the application. They didn't seem to have any issues with regard to circulation. And also, the grading on the site, the existing grade on the site, I don't know if everybody can remember, this building kind of sits down in a hole a little bit, maybe 5 or 6 feet down. So the headlight glare, which is sometimes a concern along the highway corridors, definitely won't be this case. And as you can see, we don't even have any parking. Usually you have parking up against the main corridor there. We won't even have any parking. So headlight glare, anything, grade, multitude of reasons that I think that from a headlight glare perspective that's taken care of. Ms. Vanucci, I think your question was answered by Brian, unless there's anything else.
I've got one for
Sure.
you, Brian. Are you going to tear that building down, or are y'all just going to renovate that building?
They're tearing it
It's completely tore down?
Complete demolition.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Anything else for Mr. Ferrugi? All right, thank you, sir. And now we'll open up the public hearing. As with all our public hearings, the public has an opportunity to come and speak on this topic. When you come up to the front, you have 3 minutes. State your name and your address. Address this one public hearing item. When you see the yellow light, come on, you have 1 minute remaining, and with the red light, we ask you wrap up your comments. So if anyone would like to speak, please come forward at this time. All right, seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back up. I believe this is in your district, Mr. Boswell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move for approval for CUP 171-51716.
All right. And we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Mr. Boswell? Ms. Vanucci?
No further comment.
Anyone else on the commission? Hearing none, we'll now take a vote for Mr. Boswell's motion for approval. And it passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Ferrugi, and good luck. We now move to our second public hearing of the evening. Mr. Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, please recognize Mr. Googe for the presentation.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Brian Googe again with Planning and Zoning. Next presentation tonight is for another conditional use permit. This one is for a Firestone Convenience Auto Service Center at McCourt Loop. The request is conditional use permit for an automobile service facility. The zoning district is B2 Urban Commercial with proffers, and it's within the Highway Corridor Overlay Zoning District. Both of these districts require conditional use permit for an automobile service facility. The site is 1.062 acres. The applicant is Bridgestone Retail Operations, and the primary contact again is Ryan Ferrugi. The site's located on the south side of Warrenton Road and west side of McCourt Loop. This particular section is the westernmost section of parcel 44-120B. The surrounding uses include the B2 zone Starbucks to the east that shares the same parcel as this one. There's an M1 zone industrial park to the south, an M1 zone cell tower immediately west of this piece, and a B2 zone church to the west of that. And across from Warrenton Road, there's B2 zone gas station and B2 zone multi-tenant commercial building. So the zoning history for the site, this property was rezoned the B2 zoning district in 2014. At that time, a sit-down restaurant was envisioned for the western portion of this parcel, generally where the proposed Firestone is to be located. There are proffers associated with this rezoning, which address transportation improvements, architecture, fencing, signage, and traffic generation from uses on the parcel. the proposed development we find is in keeping with these proper requirements. Here's a slide showing existing conditions. We actually didn't have an aerial photograph current enough to show actual existing conditions, so next best thing was to use the Starbucks site plan. So that's what's shown here. The site is cleared and connected to existing drive aisles, both off of Warrenton Road and McWhort Loop, which serve the adjacent Starbucks. There's an additional cleared pad site at the center of the property. And here's a photograph facing north from the existing entrance on McWhort Loop. May or may not be able to see, but the site slightly slopes downward from Warrenton Road. The generalized development plan provided by the applicant depicts a 7,700 square foot auto service facility with 8 service bays. A 2-way drive aisle connects the existing entrances on Warrenton Road and McWhort Loop. There's parking to the east and south of the building. An inter-parcel connection is proposed between this use and the adjacent parcel to the west. A loading space and dumpster pad are at the southern end of the building, so the loading space is right on the edge of the southern end, and the dumpster pad is down close to McWhort Loop so that they would both be adequately screened from the highway corridor. And finally, there's sidewalks which connect to the existing sidewalks along Warrenton Road and McWhort Loop. Staff does note that there may be issues with the mixing of traffic at the southern end of the property near McWhort Loop. There's sort of some odd angles where traffic's going to intersect, especially if and when the adjacent parcel to the west is developed for commercial uses, as well as the parcel or the pad site at the center of this parcel. So you'd have vehicles, coming to Starbucks and this parcel, and you'd have sort of a jog here getting into Firestone. And then you have also 2-way traffic coming from this future interparcel connection. Ideally, those would all be sort of lined up, and they'd be more of a manageable arrangement. But due to the layout of the building and space constraints at the site, that's basically the configuration they had to go with.
Oh, and if I may add, right next to your connector is where you're saying that deliveries will be.
That's correct, right here.
So that you'd have that in there as well.
Yes, yes. A TIA was not required for this application since the proposed use would generate less than 1,000 vehicle trips per day. Staff also notes that the proposed use would generate less traffic than the previously proposed restaurant.
Brian,
Sure.
right there where Mr. Cohen said we'd be delivering, right there where you showed me where there's some delivery will be?
Yes,
at the
sir.
Firestone. Is it possible that they could come to the left and make that a driveway where it could come around and not cause such a big problem with the intersection right there with the traffic? In other words, come to the left of that building and just circle back around and tie into that exit? Do you follow what I'm saying?
I think so. Are you saying bring the interparcel access a little closer?
See where the red arrow is, and where the red arrow is, and it comes out to the left. And can it go to the left side of that building and come around?
Are you saying sort of?
All right, go back now. And where you started the blue pin?
Uh-huh.
All right, take a left.
Over here. Left.
Yeah, there you go. And go around.
Okay.
Can it go around keep
Oh,
going
go
the
around
building.
like
Yeah,
this?
Yeah, and then come and hooks right into there. Would that be possible to?
I expect that access would be too close to the access on McWhort Loop.
Okay.
So that you'd have issues with vehicles stacked here.
But this
and
is
having
parking lot right
conflict.
there. Is that just parking lot right there, or is that just?
Right here?
dumpster? Yeah.
Yes, that's just parking lot.
So they could shave that off a little bit to come in there? I'm just trying to think for, until they get the line.
The one suggestion we had for the applicant was look at potentially shifting this slightly down, maybe not as far down as here, but just sort of separating it from this intersection a little more
Right,
so that it's not quite so jumbled right there. I forget what exact reasoning they provided for, I think it was site constraints or something to do with space requirements, but I'm sure the applicant can elaborate on that a
Okay.
little bit
all
more.
right, thank you.
Okay, architectural renderings provided by the applicant depict the styles, materials, and colors to be used for the proposed building. Since this site is located within the HC overlay district, buildings must conform to the Neighborhood Design Standards Plan. The building design provided by the applicant is consistent with some of these recommendations, including use of architectural concrete masonry and subtle earth tone colors. Staff notes that compliance with the NDS plan will be verified at the time of site plan or building permit review. Proposed conditions include the site to be developed in general conformance with the GDP, that all service be conducted within the bays, no inoperable vehicles or unlicensed vehicles parked on the property. And I would like to note that there was some concern from the applicant about this condition and concern that, okay, if there's a vehicle that's not operable that they're working on, there maybe needs to be some sort of allowance for that, to have a vehicle temporarily at the site that's inoperable. And the applicants can speak about that a little more. Also, restrictions to outdoor display or storage of tires and parts, and that monument signs and dumpster enclosure must be constructed with similar materials of the primary building. Staff finds the positives are that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan recommendations, consistent with the established development patterns. The proposed conditions will help mitigate impacts to surrounding properties. And the negative noted is that there are potential conflicts with the proposed internal traffic pattern at the southern end of the site near McCourt Loop. Finally, staff recommends that the project benefits outweigh the negatives and recommends approval with the proposed conditions. I'll take any questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Groot? No questions, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
So now the applicant's person. I think we recognize Mr. Faruqi.
Members of the commission, good evening again. Ryan Faruqi, engineer, Bagby Faruqi Goodpasture, representing both the applicant, who is Bridgestone Firestone, who are in the audience, and the owner, Frontier Development, Jim Leach. Brian, thanks again for a great, very thorough presentation. Again, I'll just kind of hit the highlights, and then we can address the couple of concerns that were brought up during the presentation by Brian. A little bit of history on the project. I was involved with the original rezoning. I know, Daryl, you and I had lengthy conversations about this. There's this Starbucks that's there now. The entire parcel was envisioned to have 3 individual pad sites. One of the pad sites is obviously used now or occupied by Starbucks. So we have 2 other pad sites. So part of the site configuration, which I'll get to about the access, is that we're still trying to envision, or have the ability, I should say, to keep the second pad site viable, keeping our fingers crossed for a sit-down restaurant on US 17. But so that's part of the reason that we do have some site constraints that we are trying to deal with. The frontage improvements that Brian spoke about, all of those frontage improvements are there. So the additional through lane that drops into a right turn lane, all of the entrances that are there. This site, I think 2 weeks ago, was released by Stafford County from bond for the Starbucks, and all of the development is there. So really just envision this as a pad site development. We don't really have any access to and from the, public right-of-ways. We're just literally kind of, and you could see from the slide, from the picture, it's a very gradual slope. The site's been developed, so literally you're just plopping a building in a in a vacant space right now. The only other thing that I wanted to discuss with you guys was the space constraints regarding the loading space in the travelway. So one thing that's not shown very well, it's never easily shown on a two-dimensional plan, is the grade that's coming in off of McCourt Loop onto this site. I did the design plans for this. There's about a 8%, 10% grade from McCourt Loop up to the to the developed area of the 3 different pad sites. So making your connection, as you were saying, coming around, coming down, the grades just aren't going to lend itself to that. And the reason we try to do that is we're trying to make sure that we get the buildings up out of the ground. This is a very prominent intersection on 17, so we want to make sure that we can keep the buildings up and not depressed, so we have a really good visual cone, from cars coming in both directions. I know we do have access to a signal, but we don't have a grade separated median there, so we don't have access really from a left in a traditional fashion, so we want to make sure to keep the site up. So to your question, Mr. English, bringing it around just won't really work from a three-dimensional grade perspective. And Brian touched on it briefly. VDOT requirements are for a one-lane ingress, egress, out entrance. You have to have a 50-foot offset before you can have another entrance, even if it's just a private travelway. So that also would be a conflict with the VDOT requirement for that entrance. And the last thing that we would like to discuss is have a little bit of discussion about the condition regarding the inoperable vehicle. This applicant, Firestone, they are not we want to make sure we paint a very clear picture that this is not a collision repair facility. They are a total care maintenance facility. They don't do heavy repair. They don't tear down, rebuild engines. They don't do, people come here, they get their tires replaced, they get their fluids drained, they get their fluids replaced, air filters. This is not this is not something where tow trucks are going to become, that somebody's not going to get an accident and they're going to come and drop this vehicle here, drain all the fluids out of it, it's going to sit there for 3 months. The reason the concern about the inoperable vehicle component is, say, for example, a parts on back order for 3 days or 5 days. They need that facility, they need that, to replace an air filter or an oxygen sensor, something to pass inspection or something to pass emissions. If they need to get that part, it needs to sit there. I guess technically by the letter of the law, it's inoperable if it doesn't have valid registration or valid state inspection. But those are things that they'd be working towards. But this is not a collision repair facility where they're dropping, severely damaged vehicles or replacing transmissions or rebuilding engines or anything like that. It's just very much you come in quick maintenance in and out, and that's and that's the intent of the use. And with that, I'll take any questions. if there are any.
Mr. Chairman, I could probably add some light to that subject matter. The county code in chapter 15 addresses inoperable vehicles, and I guess it really wasn't much of a focus on us as we were talking about the conditions, but there is a definition of inoperable vehicle, and our office works with the Sheriff's Department for enforcement. I can read the definition if you're interested. Yes, please. Inoperable motor vehicle is one that's not in operating condition. It's a vehicle that's been partially disassembled or evidenced by the removal of its wheels and tires, engine, or one or more of the components that's essential to the operation of the vehicle, and shall be considered not in operating condition. So typically an inoperable vehicle in that description you wouldn't see at this type of facility.
Correct. Yeah, we're not going to have the engine pulled out of it or sitting on cinder blocks.
Also, it does not display state license plates or displays state license plates that have been expired by more than 60 days. Does not display a state motor vehicle inspection decal or displays a state motor vehicle inspection decal that's been expired for more than 60 days. So in most cases, their type of operation, you're not going to see something that's going to be qualified as
Right.
an inoperable vehicle. But from a practical standpoint, whether it's a condition or not, it's still something that's enforceable by the county code.
Right. Well, and I guess my question would be, and I may be wrong, unfortunately, I've never been in this situation, but if your car fails its inspection, don't you get a temporary thing that says?
You do get a little rejection.
So even if it was sitting at your at your lot awaiting a part, it still would have that label that says that they are operable.
That
I
is
mean,
correct.
And even theoretically, the person could still drive it.
That is correct.
Until you get the part in. So if we use the county code, which is inoperable, means basically you're not having an engine in there, or there's no tires on it whatsoever, that wouldn't apply to yours either. So everything that's in the condition really doesn't apply to what you'd be doing. So the
Correct.
condition is okay to be there.
As long as that definition is okay. We were initially okay with this. I will tell you, Bridgestone's attorney, they looked at it, so I think their preference would be to just make sure that everything is there, 100% okay. If the definition of inoperable vehicle changes in the county code, I think their preference would be to have that removed, but the county is still protected by the definition that Jeff.
So can we just remove it?
Okay.
Yeah, just remove it.
Okay.
That
this-
would be the applicant's preference.
All right. Okay.
Are you good with that?
Okay.
The
All right.
code is still applicable regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Correct.
code's going to be, so
Yes,
you might as
Mr.
well.
Chairman, correct.
okay.
The code is applicable, and also standard language in the use permit says if they violate the
to-
code, the permit could be
Revoked,
And if
right.
we update
So
the
just-
code, then we gotta, you know, it's gonna be contradictory essentially.
All right. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Faruqi? Seeing none. All right, thank you, sir. We now open this up to the public hearing. Once again, if you'd like to come forward, give your name and address. You have 3 minutes to speak. Green light, you start. Yellow light, you have 1 minute left. Red light, we ask you to wrap up your comments. And anyone wishing to come forward, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. There's nothing really for staff or Mr. Frugy to address, so this is in your district, Mr. English? How
Yes.
say ye?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve CUP 17151678.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Seconded by Mr. Boswell.
Really quick question, do we need to say approve with the striking of that proper?
But I think
We're just going to leave it.
Mr. English is going for
Okay.
approval with it staying in there.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Mr. English? Any comments?
No.
Mr. Boswell? Anyone else? Okay. And just from my standpoint, if that's the code, we might as well just keep the code in there, and if for some reason it changes, we can address it at that time. But I don't see the need to pull out that one element when it would apply anyways. So that's why I was sort of saying it makes sense just to leave it there. So, all right, seeing no other comments, we have a motion for approval, if everyone will take this chance to vote. And it passes unanimously. Congratulations again, Mr. Frugy. All right, Mr. Harvey, we move now to item number 3, and we get to see the
Mr.
same
Gooch
gentleman again.
please.
We're gouging ourselves today.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Brian Gooch again with Planning and Zoning. Last presentation for tonight is conditional use permit for the Heartwood Freestanding Emergency Center. The request is a conditional use permit for a hospital within the B2 Urban Commercial Zoning District with proffers and within the Highway Corridor Overlay Zoning District, both of which require a conditional use permit for a hospital. The site is 1.73 acres. The applicant is Spotsylvania Medical Center Incorporated. The agent is Deborah Ray Carnes of Lemming and Healy. The site is located on the south side of Warrenton Road, northwest of the intersection of Banksford Parkway and Watson Way. So this is just to the west of this last CUP we were discussing. The surrounding properties are Zone B2, which include a Merchants Tire and Auto immediately to the west, Cornerstone Church to the east, that's here, used auto dealer to the north, and a vacant pad site to the south. This property and many of the surrounding properties were rezoned to the B2 zoning district in 2008. At that time, a bank with a 4-lane drive-through was envisioned for this parcel. There are proffers associated with this rezoning, which address transportation improvements in the area, architectural standards, signage, landscaping, and stormwater facilities. And also note that although it wasn't mentioned in the staff report, there was an approved conditional use permit for the drive-through for the bank. We find that the proposed development is in keeping with the existing proffered conditions. Existing conditions, you'll see an aerial photograph here at the upper left. This is a cleared, level pad site with shared private street along the southern property line and a paved interparcel connection from the adjacent merchants at the north end of the site. That's here. And the lower photograph is a view from Warrenton Road. You'll see that there's also an existing monument sign for the development at the corner. The generalized development plan depicts a 10,820 square foot freestanding emergency center, or FSED. The main site access is from Watson Way. That's the shared private street at the south end of the parcel. There's two-way drive aisles surrounding the building with parking at the north and east ends of the building. There's an interparcel connection proposed to the adjacent merchants drive aisle, generally in the same location as the existing paved connection. There's an ambulance canopy at the south end of the building. The ambulance canopy at the south end of the building, and a public pickup drop-off canopy at the north end. There's also signage which directs the public traffic entering the site to the north end of the building for parking and use of the emergency canopy there, and that directs emergency vehicle traffic immediately east to the south end of the building where the ambulance canopy is located. There's also two proposed emergency vehicle parking spots that would be signed and designed as such. And there's also some striped area adjacent to the ambulance canopy, which could be used as temporary parking areas for emergency vehicles. Since the, also, one other thing, the applicant is proposing sidewalk connections to the existing sidewalks along Warrenton Road and Banksford Parkway. Also, there's an existing piece of sidewalk at the adjacent merchants. So they're proposing a connection from the existing sidewalk on Banksford all the way to that existing sidewalk. The dumpster pad and loading space are located at the southern end of the building and would be effectively screened from view from Warrenton Road.
Brian, question for you.
Yes, sir.
You got ambulance canopy and you got emergency canopy. What's the difference? Why is it, what's the ambulance and what's the emergency? This is an emergency room, right? So is it two emergency entrances?
Well, basically, one is a dedicated canopy for emergency vehicle drop-off or pickup from the site, and that's at the southern end of the building. For a general public who's driving to the site and who has an emergency or they're picking up someone, they would utilize the canopy at the north end of the building. So it's just a way to separate the area where emergency vehicles need to be ingressing and egressing and preventing any conflicts from regular traffic who are utilizing the canopy.
So if EMS comes in with an emergency, they're going to go to the back of the building to the emergency entrance to drop off, correct?
That's correct.
So, and if somebody's they got to go, since this is an emergency room, they've got serious injuries, they come in, it was a heart attack, they got to be transported to Mary Washington Hospital, to the next closest hospital, so they would use the ambulance entrance?
Yes, so if an emergency vehicle and ambulance had to pick up someone and transfer them to a hospital nearby, they would use that ambulance canopy as well.
Okay, thank you.
Since the site is located within the Highway Corridor Overlay District, buildings must conform to the Neighborhood Design Standards Plan. The applicant has not submitted architectural renderings for the proposed building. However, compliance with the NDS plan and the existing proffered conditions relating to architectural design would be verified at the time of site plan or building permit review. Also, a TIA was not required with this application since the proposed use would generate less than 1,000 vehicle trips per day. Staff also notes that the proposed use would generate less traffic than the previously proposed bank. A couple quick slides showing the bigger picture of site access. Here's some sort of flow arrows showing how traffic would enter the site. So basically, eastbound traffic could either enter on this also shared private travelway down to Watson Way and enter the site from the south end. They could also turn on Banksford Parkway and take a right on Watson Way to enter that way.
Quick question, Brian. Is there a light at Banksford Parkway
Yes, there is.
at the intersection of Warrenton Road and Banksford?
I have another question, but to the left of the star, sort of between the star and your multiple lines there, we just got rid of them. That building, you said was a merchant's?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that have direct access off of 17?
No, it does not.
Okay, so this gets to your other thing. You had a interparcel connector between that and the one before us tonight. So I'm trying to see the rationale for, I mean, somebody's not going to come in down that road that you just pointed to us and then go up through merchants to come through the interconnector, right?
That's right. I think from an emergency standpoint, I think fire and EMS would like to see an alternate access to the site. I agree that most traffic is not going to be they're not going to be going through merchants to access the site. I also note that I believe with the conditional use permit for the merchants, the interparcel access to this particular site was a condition of that CUP. Westbound traffic on Warrenton Road would most likely take a left on Banksford Parkway and enter from Watson Way. As far as exiting the site, if traffic needs to head eastbound on Warrenton, probably the best option would be to exit on Banksford Parkway South and then turn down McWhort Loop because there's no U-turn here. Otherwise, they could go back to the west and come up this right in, right out entrance, shared travelway to head east.
When you're doing the going east and come up, that right there, isn't that a restaurant right there? That's Bojangles, right?
That's Bojangles, correct.
Okay.
For westbound traffic exiting on Warrenton Road, they could exit out Watson Way down to McWhort Loop and then up Celebrate Virginia Parkway where there's a signalized intersection. Couple additional things. There was a zoning determination and appeal for this property. Little history on that. The applicant submitted a zoning administrator's determination application in October 2016 in order to determine if the freestanding emergency department met the county code definition as a medical clinic. I'll note that a medical clinic is a by right use in the B2 zoning district, and it is not subject to a conditional use permit approval when located within the Highway Corridor Overlay zoning district. The zoning administrator issued a determination finding that the proposed use would be considered a hospital in the zoning ordinance since the facility is required to be licensed through the Virginia Department of Health. The applicant then filed an application to appeal this determination in February 2017. The Board of Zoning Appeals voted in May of 2017 in favor of the zoning administrator's determination, upholding the classification of the proposed use as a hospital. The applicant is therefore required to obtain a conditional use permit for the proposed use. The second is a certificate of public need. Spotsylvania Medical Center applied for and received a certificate of public need from the Virginia Department of Health to allow a CT imaging center to be located at this proposed facility. The review for the certificate of public need evaluated the merits of the additional CT scan, including geographic considerations, the availability and utilization of other CT scans in the area, and the potential to encourage beneficial competition. The proposed conditions are for the site to be developed in general conformance with the GDP, that no new access points on Warrenton Road or Banksford Parkway will be constructed, that at least 2 parking spaces dedicated for emergency vehicle use will be provided, that the dumpster pad and loading area will be located at the south end of the building and effectively screened, and the monument signs and dumpster enclosure will be constructed of similar materials to the primary building, and also standards for signage. Staff notes the positives, that this development is consistent with the comprehensive plan recommendations, is consistent with the established development patterns in the vicinity, and the conditions will help mitigate impacts on surrounding properties, and there's no negative aspects noted. Finally, staff recommends approval with the proposed conditions.
All right, any other questions for, yes,
And that's
Mr.
the
English?
only-
I'm going to wait till after hear from the applicant.
Applicant, all right,
Comments?
all right. Anyone else for staff? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir. And we bring up, I do recognize that that is not Ms. Carnes. So, Mr. Healy, come on down.
Mr. Healy, thanks a lot.
Go ahead, Mr. Lenning.
I'm Clark Lemming. Actually, there was a judge that used to refer to me as Mr. Healy. Yes. Good evening. I'm Clark Lemming, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. And I was hoping that Ryan Ferrugi would do my presentation for me. He's doing so well tonight. I think that what I'd like to do is to limit what I have to say to a brief explanation of what a freestanding emergency department is, to the extent that there are any commissioners not familiar with the concept. Is that helpful?
Sure.
All right. Freestanding emergency departments started to pop up in the 1970s, and there are now about 600 of them over the country, throughout the country. Most are affiliated with specific hospitals. About 20%, according to recent journal articles, are independent. Technically, a freestanding emergency department is simply a facility that receives patients or emergency services that is structurally separate and apart from the hospital. Now, 2 obvious points of comparison that are discussed in the literature. One is an urgent care. What's the difference between them? Well, one is the degree of acuity involving the services and the types of injuries or emergency situations that are treated by the facility. Urgent care facilities typically are dealing with low to moderate acuity. Emergency departments are dealing with moderate to extreme. The staffing is more sophisticated in that respect. The diagnostic equipment is more sophisticated in that respect. For instance, the CT scanner that would be available and that has been approved by the state for inclusion at this particular facility. CT scanners would be extremely rare at a urgent care center. We found one in the state of Virginia, an urgent care center that had a CT scanner. So that's really what it comes down to. They are comparable, very comparable to the emergency departments that you would find co-located at hospitals in the area. Now, the nearest freestanding emergency department is located in Spotsylvania County, approximately 3 miles from Spotsylvania Regional Hospital. It is operated by Medicor. It has been there a number of years. It's operated in a 3-story building. As I understand it, the bottom floor is the freestanding emergency department. That floor is about 17,000 square feet. There are freestanding emergency departments in Richmond, in Fairfax, and Loudoun counties. The proposed facility is about 10,000 square feet. That is mid-range. I've only come across a couple that were smaller than that for this kind of facility. So that's what they are. The freestanding emergency department went through a state review, as I indicated, for the CT scanner. That was approved, and a certificate of public need was issued, as was indicated by your in your presentation earlier. I'll touch just briefly on the issue of the BZA appeal, because that was brought up in your staff report. In this day and time, there are a number of ways that land use attorneys are required to consider to attain the objectives of their client. When this application begun, there were some of you may be aware, there were some pretty positive comments about the application made by some of the supervisors. Those comments changed within a month or so. Meantime, when the process started, the engineering firm that put together the GDP had requested the opinion from the zoning administrator as to whether this was a medical clinic or a hospital under the zoning ordinance. And there's no in between. There's nothing in between medical clinic and hospital. Now, the result of that was that the zoning administrator determined that under the ordinance, this was a hospital. And there was a lengthy, as Mr. Apicella knows, there was a lengthy hearing at the Planning Commission and a good bit of debate at that level. And the zoning administrator was upheld. Now, this application had been filed long before any of that proceeded. So we try to keep all options open. So that is the reason I stand here before you tonight, having appealed the zoning administrator's determination, thinking that to be in the best interest of my client, and stand before you tonight asking that you consider the conditional use permit application, which is on an entirely separate track. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover. I'm happy to answer questions. I think I have an engineer here to assist if we need assistance in that regard. I think most of the planning issues have been covered by the staff, and I don't think there are any particularly difficult planning issues. As was indicated, this use actually generates less traffic than the use that was already approved for the site. So there was no TIA. As far as the architecturals are concerned, the applicant simply hasn't gotten to the point of developing a specific model for this facility. And not to say that they will not do that or could not do that. They simply haven't at this point. However, between the proffer and the guidelines that you have for the overlay district, I think that architecturals are fairly well established. I'd also point out that under the CUP, we're required to build the layout that is shown on the GDP, minor modifications for engineering issues that may come up. But what you see on the GDP is what you get here. So there's not much room for flexibility there. That really is all I wanted to cover in my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lemming. Any questions? Ms. Vanucci?
I have a couple of questions. Is this freestanding emergency clinic going to be associated with any of the area hospitals?
Yes, it is associated. Yes, I'm sorry, I thought that was clear. It is associated with Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center.
And so will they be providing physician care on site 24 hours while it's operating?
Well, it's an emergency care center. It does not permit patients on an overnight basis. Emergency and surgery, as a rule, is not provided. However, stabilization procedures, and a doctor would have to tell you exactly where the line is between stabilizing someone and sending them to the hospital and providing emergency treatment for someone. So it is not intended as an overnight facility where somebody would be operated on and then released. However, in the case of a broken leg, certainly there would be things that could probably be done at that facility and a patient released.
So one of the questions I have, because healthcare is kind of my business, is a lot of, nationally, there have been a lot of issues with some of these freestanding
Yes.
clinics and issues with public safety. A couple of different issues arise. One of the major issues is that some of the states do not regulate that a physician be on site 24 hours or, well, whenever the facility is actually open. So I'm just curious if if you know what the Virginia state law is and regulation, and will this particular emergency center will always have a physician on site during operating hours, or will it just be nursing
Yes, this
staff?
facility will have a physician or more on site during, you mean operating of the facility, not operating
Yeah.
on the patients, yes? Yes, 24 hours, yes. And no problem with a condition to that effect. I'll be happy to find out whether state law requires that, but it is the intent that this facility be, have physicians available on a 24-hour basis.
Okay, and the second issue, and you might have to do a little research and get back to us, is being that it's situated with a local hospital, Spotsylvania Hospital, will they accept Medicare in that particular hospital? Because that's another issue with freestanding clinics, is that they don't accept Medicare, so patients actually get routed there, and then they find out that they will be facing massive out-of-pocket costs because they're not insured, because freestanding clinics do not get reimbursement from CMS unless associated with a hospital.
I think some of the stories you've read about that have to do with the independent clinics, independent freestanding emergency departments that are not affiliated with the hospital.
With hospital,
And
yeah.
of course, the payment system there would be completely different. Because this is affiliated with a hospital, the payment for the services here would be the same as they would be at the parent hospital,
Okay.
including Medicare.
Any other questions? Mr. English?
Yeah, I have one. You said this standing up is going to be Spotsylvania, correct? Spotsylvania Medical Center, is that what we're calling it, or freestanding Spotsylvania?
Well, the name of it is going to be the Heartwood.
Okay, but it's it's affiliated with Spotsylvania
That's
Hospital?
correct.
Now, you bring in, somebody has a heart attack, they come into that facility, the closest hospital they're going to go to is going to be where? Where would they transport the heart? They're not going to be able to keep the heart attack patient at this clinic or this freestanding clinic, so they're going to have to transport them. Where are they going to transport this
My
person?
understanding is that there are two considerations there. And, as I guess everybody can figure out, there would be three potential places
Okay.
if a patient needed to be admitted where they could go.
Right.
Stafford Hospital, Mary Washington, or Spotsylvania Hospital.
Right, I think they have to go to the closest hospital.
And yes, and as I understand what the regulations, the pertinent regulations would be, number one, what is closest? Number two, what are the medical needs of the patient
Correct.
in relation to those facilities? And number three, what is the preference of the patient? You know,
Right.
if the patient has a preference.
Well, if they're had a heart attack, I think they're going to probably want to go to the closest one. But let me ask you this question. I've had a heart attack. I didn't, but I did. And I go to this Heartwood Medical Facility. You can't treat me. I'm serious. So now I've got to go to the closest hospital, which is going to be Mary Washington Hospital. So now I've got an emergency room bill here at Spotsylvania Hospital. It's probably bill or whatever. And now I'm going to have another emergency room bill from Mary Washington Hospital. How is that going to work? Because I know my insurance, I've got to pay $350 right up front if I go to emergency room. So am I going to get hit twice because of the facility? And if that's the case, I am definitely not in support of that, because I can't afford $300 to go to emergency room. I have to go to patient first because I can't afford that. Because that's one of my main concerns, because people that have heart attacks are probably on fixed income anyway, and so you're going to hit them twice, double hit them. So I need to know that answer.
All right, I can find that out for you. I
Okay.
don't know the answer. It's
Okay.
beyond my pay grade. I don't know what the answer is.
Okay, that's a serious question that needs to be answered. Okay, right now.
Thank you. Ms. Panucci?
Yeah, no, I was just going to kind of echo Darrell's comments, which is sort of what I was getting at earlier on the physician payment schedules at these acute care facilities. I think understanding the payment model, if you were to check into this emergency facility and who would be picking up the bill, my assumption is that potentially especially if you're a Medicare patient, if they didn't have any tied payment to the hospital payment system, if you weren't admitted into Spotsylvania, let's say you're that heart attack person, they would essentially charge you full out of pocket to see this emergency facility if you were then to go into Mary Washington, a non-affiliated hospital. So just getting some clarity on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
And you can do that on the CMS physician fee schedule.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Lemming?
Nothing yet.
Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Yes.
We now move to our public hearing. As with the last two public hearings, if you'd like to speak, come forward to the microphone. You have 3 minutes to speak. At the green light, state your name and your address. At the yellow light, you have 1 minute left, and then at the red light, we ask that you wrap up your comments. And we have somebody coming down so we do have at least one person for this public hearing.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Eric Fletcher. I'm here actually representing Mary Washington Healthcare, the parent of Stafford Hospital, located at 2300 Fall Hill Avenue in Fredericksburg. I wanted to talk for a minute this evening about the county's comprehensive plan. And as you all are well aware, that plan establishes the goals and objectives and policies that shape the future direction of the community, as well as the county's vision for anticipated growth. And specifically, it talks about things like transportation and housing and public facilities and infrastructure, natural and cultural resources. But in essence, that plan operates as a guide upon which development proposals are evaluated to ensure conformance to the desires of the community and the county. Stafford County obviously has a comprehensive plan. It's a very good comprehensive plan. And Spotsylvania Medical Center's proposed emergency department is not consistent with the county's plan. There is one place in the county that is zoned for hospital facilities. It's the ground that Stafford Hospital sits on. And that's because the county planned for hospital facilities to be there within the county, to coalesce the resources of hospitals so that we wouldn't have diluted and disparate facilities across the county. Over 10 years ago, Mary Washington Healthcare began working with Stafford County officials to place the hospital in Stafford County at a cost of over $170 million. And for that unprecedented level of investment, Stafford Hospital became an embedded and important part of the comprehensive plan. So the impact of a second hospital facility becomes an important consideration to understand from a land use perspective. In fact, Stafford Hospital is a community service facility that provides an important service to citizens of the county. In fact, Virginia Code, Section 15.2-2223C2, specifically identifies hospitals as the type of community service facility to be addressed in the comprehensive plan. In addition to being inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, the proposed emergency department is also incongruent with the county's 2015 Economic Development Strategic Action Plan, which identifies the courthouse area as a priority area of focus. There are 4 pieces of development in the courthouse area. Stafford Hospital campus is one of those. So the county has planned for the economic development opportunities around Stafford Hospital and the courthouse area. That would be undermined by this proposal. It would have a significant negative impact on the hospital facility, and that impact needs to be understood and analyzed carefully, given the public health, safety, and welfare role the hospital plays in the community. In fact, Stafford Hospital just continues to grow since it's opened. It's added advanced radiation therapy for cancer patients. It's added vascular surgery to treat circulatory diseases, level 2 neonatal intensive care unit to treat our sickest infants. We've added urgent care and primary care throughout the county. We employ over 500 Stafford County residents. And additional future growth and development of services related to Stafford County residents and the jobs in this community are at risk if the county allows the Hospital Corporation of America, Spotsylvania Medical Center's parent, to build hospital facilities which will harm Stafford Hospital and are not in alignment with the county's plans. So in closing, I respectfully ask the Planning Commission to deny Spotsylvania Medical Center's application for the conditional use permit because it does not meet the letter or intent of the comprehensive plan or the development plans of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well, and you?
Good. My name is Kathy Oblonsky. I live at 100 Boscobel Road, Stafford, Virginia, 22405. I'm also the administrator for Stafford Hospital. The staff report comments, the comprehensive plan currently recognizes Stafford Hospital Center as the only hospital to be in existence in the county. The new freestanding ED site would be the second hospital facility in the county. Due to the proximity to the existing highway-oriented businesses and the surrounding traffic volume, staff believes that the proposed use for this would be a good fit for this area. I strongly disagree. I would like to highlight two key points that I did not see in the staff report. The second hospital facility will be detrimental impact on the existing hospital that is identified in the Stafford County's comprehensive plan. There's a move in the healthcare industry to actually decrease the use of emergency department visits due to the high cost of the level of care. There was a quote from a Dallas publication called DCEO in May 2016. The ER is the most expensive place to receive care, and one of the industry's oldest challenges how to steer patients to a more affordable care site when their condition affords them that chance. A 2010 study in Healthcare Affairs pegged the nation's cost savings at a whopping $4.4 billion if patients could actually seek care in a different setting. The proposed facility will not expand services to our community. It will only increase the care of costs of health care, and it will just relocate patients. The proposed second hospital facility will have a profound impact on Stafford Hospital's emergency department. We feel the impact would be almost 2,000 patients a year and almost 200 admissions. 74% of hospital admissions come from an emergency department. Stafford Hospital has been in existence for 8 years. This type of impact to a new and growing facility is divesting the care in our community. Stafford Hospital is built for expansion and growth, and I feel that the second hospital facility will only have a negative effect on our community hospital and the ability to further expand the growth of this that the Stafford is built to do for our community. There's also a patient convenience issue here that's not addressed. If a patient at the proposed Spotsylvania Medical Center freestanding ED requires transports to a hospital for a higher level of treatment than offered at the proposed freestanding ED, the medical transport will be delaying getting the patient to the hospital with a higher level of care, which will be most likely Spotsylvania Regional Medical. They will receive 2 bills. Or 1 bill if they go to Spotsy. If they go to another facility, they will get 2 bills. This is also further complicates for our community. Families of patients who would have to be admitted would have to leave our county and go to a Spotsylvania-based business to get care. That was not the intent of the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Oblonsky. Wrap up.
I just want to say that, because the proposed Spotsylvania Medical Center freestanding ED will be a department of Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center, a business located in Spotsylvania County. The revenue generated by this Spotsylvania-based business from the residents of Stafford County will be used primarily to support Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center in Spotsylvania County. It will be billed under Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center.
Thank you, Ms. Oblonsky.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, sir?
Good evening. My name is Phil Brown. I live in Stafford County, 22 Scotland Circle, in the Austin Ridge subdivision. I also work for Mary Washington Healthcare as in the strategic planning department. And I've read the staff report, and I believe that there are some transportation impacts that need to be considered more carefully. A transportation analysis wasn't provided as stated in the staff report because of the low number of vehicles per day that would be accessing the site. But I think there's some things that need to be considered. One is that the Stafford Hospital Center's emergency department, the peak volumes within an emergency department come between the hours of 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. There's not an even flow of traffic in an emergency department throughout the day. There is a peak time when patients arrive, and that's between 4 to 7 p.m. And that's typical of not only Stafford Hospital ED, but it's also typical of other freestanding EDs as well. So the majority of the proposed patients, or the patients that would be accessing this proposed facility, would be arriving at a time of day when the traffic is at its peak also on Highway 17. And I think that needs to be considered. Also, the number of traffic flow and parking, the parking needs to be considered as well. As stated, the original intent behind this property, original proposal for this property was banking. Well, the typical banking transaction takes about 5 to 10 minutes. A person can be at an emergency visit for at least an hour. So, and again, with patients queuing between that 4 to 7 p.m. time period, there could be some parking issues that need to be, again, that could create problems. Also, the staff report talked about the signage issue, and they said a dedicated signing monument is proposed, but they noted that fire and rescue staff expressed concerns that the use of Spotsylvania in the facility name or signage would lead to confusion. And I know it says that the proposed name is Heartwood Freestanding Emergency Center, but there's a CMS regulation that states that a facility that is listed or organized as a department of a hospital, a bigger facility, has to have the name of the parent in all of their correspondence as well as their signage. So that's something that I think staff needs to look at that CMS regulation, because according to that regulation, the name Spotsylvania would need to be somewhere in the signage, based on my understanding of that rule. And I do have a copy, if staff is interested, in the article and the memorandum from CMS. So again, I would recommend that the Planning Commission denial this application for the conditional use permit, because it's only going to create additional traffic issues as well as confusion for fire and rescue, as well as confusion for the consumer.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Mr. Lemming, as always, we give the applicant a chance to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure it will come as no great surprise that Mary Washington Healthcare opposes Spotsylvania Hospital coming into Stafford County in any respect. It's somewhat disingenuous because Mary Washington Healthcare operates a freestanding emergency department in Spotsylvania County, 3 miles from the hospital. And perhaps the answer to some of the questions that were posed, such as, is there double billing? How are patients referred? Where are patients referred out of the Spotsylvania freestanding emergency department, by the example set there. But we are happy to provide the information we can about how this facility would operate. But there's a precedent out there, I think is the point, the precedent established by Mary Washington Healthcare. Now, as far as the comp plan is concerned, number one, I'll defer to staff. Staff has told you that this is consistent with the comp plan. I think that is a misreading of the comp plan. The only place in which the hospital is specifically referenced in your comprehensive plan is at Chapter 6, which is entitled People in the Place, and it inventories existing facilities. What's here now? But there's absolutely no prohibition, and I defer to staff, no prohibition in your comprehensive plan about healthcare facilities being located somewhere else. Now, the primary purpose of a freestanding emergency department, and not to say that there are not issues that arise with those, as I assume has been the case down in Spotsylvania County. But the primary purpose is to get patients to the emergency room sooner. Most patients it's a good thing to get to the emergency room sooner. Stafford is not an easy place to get around. If you have an emergency on Route 17, right now you have two choices. Go all the way down Route 17 and head north to Stafford Hospital or south to Mary Washington. That's it. this provides an alternative. Now, I will tell you that these issues, the issues about competition, the financial issues that were alluded to, were addressed at the state level. At the same time that Spotsylvania Hospital applied for a CT scanner, Certificate of Public Need, so did Stafford Hospital. They were both granted. And in the context of that discussion, and the full report staff has and can be made available to you, in that report, Mary Washington argued at the state level before the state health commissioner that the proposed freestanding emergency department would result in significant decreases in emergency department visits, inpatient admissions, outpatient CT scans, and so forth, and that would have a financial effect. However, the adjudication officer recommendation notes that Stafford Hospital opposed this on that very ground, but then says that I have considered the possibility of an instance of unhealthy market encroachment. I have found no compelling evidence that approval of the SRMC, not just talking about the CT scanner, but the facility, would be substantially harmful to any existing resource. Simply stated, we need as many healthcare facilities as we can invite into a community. The more the better. And the commissioner goes on to say that the encouragement of this kind of healthy competition between healthcare centers is a good thing, that benefits the patient. So that issue, the issue of need, the issue of financial detriment to existing facilities, has been addressed by the state office that is authorized and provides these kinds of analyses. So that, let's see if there's anything else that I want. Oh, signage. Frankly, they'd rather have, when they first came in, they said Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center Freestanding Emergency Department. As quickly pointed out, that may cause some confusion. So the plan for the design is certainly to indicate at the bottom of the sign that there's an affiliation with Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center, but to keep the name that the Stafford emergency staff has indicated would be more appropriate and may prevent some kind of confusion about direction. So I don't think the issue of whether there's any dilution of the existing services has been addressed at the state level. If you want to find out, the best place to find out about how this kind of system works is right down with your neighbor to the south, where the same situation is already set up and appears to be working. At least we don't hear that it's not working, or that patients are being sent to Mary Washington on a disproportionate basis as opposed to the closer facility in Spotsylvania County. So hopefully medical staff do what they are bound to do, and that is what is in the best interest of the patient, and that is the primary factor that determines how patients are treated and where they end up going, and that other issues such as finances don't get in the way of that. And I trust that has been the case down in Spotsylvania County as well. If that generated any more questions, I will get back to you on this issue of the double payment and find out more about the payment model for you. I'm sorry, the CFO had an emergency that he had to attend to tonight and could not be here. He could answer the question. I'm not in a position to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Lemming.
Yes,
Any
sir.
questions for Mr. Lemming? Seeing none. All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. English, this is in your district?
Yeah, I have, I have a few questions that I need, that I would like staff to address if they would. The first one is the billing issue, if you could find out about the billing issue. Also, if they're going to be double billed, somebody's got to transport them from that facility to the other facility. So there's another cost I think that's going to be involved. So there's going to be a transportation cost. I need like to find that out. The CMS that the gentleman was talking about, the regulations for Spotsylvania Hospital and coordinates has to be on the sign. Is that law? I'd like to know about that. Also, I would like to know if you could find a number of trips that Stafford Hospital and Mary Washington get from Stafford residents, if that's possible, for their ER. How many residents that go to those ERs for emergency care, number of trips that they make in a year. I'm also concerned about the traffic impact that's going to be on that facility. I'd like some more information on that, what that's going to generate, because it looked like spaghetti to me when you got up there and he was showing all that. Because that is a confusing intersection up there, the way that comes in and out up there. And you can get turned around real quick up there, so I would like some more information on that. The law on the closest hospital, is there a law that they have to go to the closest hospital, the nearest hospital? If they had to transport out of that facility, do they have to go to the closest, nearest hospital? So those are some of the questions that I needed answered, so.
All right, Ms. Fanouche?
Couple comments, and just to reiterate your last question on the law where they have to go to the closest hospital, that would be a state and federal regulation, so make sure we have the answer to both, and which one dictates where they would end up going in Virginia. And I just want to say, in regards to timing, I know we have a lot of research to do and that there's lots of questions. I did quickly look up on CMS's public website that the relevant fee schedules that would be determining what the 2018 prospective payment models would be is the physician fee schedule, the hospital payment schedule, and the Medicare fee schedule to see if they've addressed these emergency facilities being built in the hospital care setting. Those usually are published in July of 2017 with a 60-day comment period where we'd probably want to have some time to review those. They're typically hundreds of pages long, so I personally would want a little bit of time to be able to really dive into that to address what the potential payment issues would be.
Before we go to that, Mr. English, Mr. Harvey, did you get all those questions? Stacy?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
She's writing over there.
And then lastly, with your fees, and you said transportation, ambulance fees would sort of be another term. And I'm just curious, I'm not certain where I saw this in various pieces of documentation, but was the traffic count done for this as a clinic or was it done as a hospital? Because I think that the traffic count may be different for different types of facilities. And so I just would be curious on that. And so now we throw the ball back at the Honorable Mr. English.
Oh, there was one more too, for staff. One more question. How many other emergency facilities are there in that surrounding area that this is going to be put, like urgent care, patient first? How many's in that area? I would say probably go back within a maybe 5 to 10 mile radius to see how many it is. Mr. Chairman, my motion is to, with Ms. Vidnuch says, I think that I would like to defer this until at least September the 13th. And also I'd like to leave the public hearing open. So my recommendation is to defer this until September the 13th with the public hearing open on CUP 17151-689.
Second.
So we have a motion and second is Ms. McClendon and Mr. Harvey. Do you see anything before we move forward?
Mr. Chairman, that should be fine, since
Okay.
you've announced a date certain to continue the public hearing till.
All right.
Your deadline for action is
Is October.
October 6th.
Yes, sir. I thought so. All right, Mr. English, any more comments?
No, sir.
Ms. Fanouche?
No further
Anyone
comment.
else on the commission? Seeing and hearing none, the motion is to defer until our September meeting, the first meeting in September. And it passes unanimously. All right, thank you.
Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you, sir. All right, now we move to the next item. Mr. Harvey, if you take over this, Ms. Vannucci, I'm going to pass you the gavel because I have to make a phone call relating to something that I have to do tomorrow.
Okie dokie.
Madam Chairman, if you'll please recognize Susan Blackburn for the presentation.
Ms. Blackburn?
Madam Chairman, Planning Commissioners, tonight you are to consider proposed amendments to the Stafford County Code, Section 28-33, Districts Generally, Section 28-34, Purpose of Districts, Section 28-35, Table of Uses and Standards, and Section 28-128, Types Permitted in Agricultural and Residential Districts, A1, A2, R1, R2, R3, and R4 to create a new R5 age-restricted housing zoning district. Mr. Janney, a local developer, currently owns a tract of land in South Stafford, and he proposes to construct 2 age-restricted apartment buildings with a community center for use for the future residents. Currently, there is no zoning district that can accommodate this type of development, and Mr. Janney proposes this new development, or at least he intends it, to be used as for infill development. The zoning ordinance does allow for retirement housing by approval of a conditional use permit in the R2 urban residential medium density, R3 urban residential high density, and the PD1 and PD2 planned development districts. It allows for retirement housing as a by right in the life care and the recreational business campus district. All of these districts either have densities that are too low, the lowest is 3.25, going all the way up to 15 dwelling units per acre in the life care, or they have large minimum acreage requirements. So none of these districts really will accommodate this type of a housing development. During the discussions for the previous amendment, staff was asked to exclude the military impact areas as shown on the comprehensive plan from the areas where the zone would be appropriate and place a minimum and maximum acreage for these districts. This exclusion was included in the current proposed amendment along with the acreage limitations. Staff was also asked to research the density levels permitted in the neighboring jurisdictions and other 55 age communities. Fairfax County and Prince William allow for densities of 16 to 30 dwelling units per acre, and there is no age restriction on those. Spotsylvania County allows for up to 12 dwelling units with a minimum of 4 acres of land and up to 16 dwelling units in a mixed residential development. Hanover County allows for up to 15 dwelling units for multifamily dwelling developments. Henrico County is 14.5 to 19.8 dwelling units for multifamily developments, and Loudoun County provides densities of 16 to 24 dwelling units in residential districts, but that is the only one where the ordinance actually states it is used for infill development. None of these counties require any kind of restriction for age of the occupants. And when staff looked at the 55-plus communities, particularly in the greater Fredericksburg area, they consisted of large communities with mixed developments consisting of single-family detached homes, townhouses, and apartments, and included such amenities as golf courses, clubhouses with pools, and these kind of developments really are not what this ordinance is designed for. Comments we received from Fire and Rescue, though, did not support this proposal. And the statements from Fire and Rescue stated, according to the National Fire Protection Association, older adults 65 and older are more than twice as likely to die in a fire as compared to the remainder of the population. Unlike assisted living buildings or nursing homes that have stringent codes and standards, the building and fire codes applicable to these multifamily structures are nearly just the bare minimum that would require for any apartment building. Mandatory evacuation drills, which help identify residents' concerns or mobility issues before an emergency, could not be required by the Fire Marshal Office for multifamily dwellings. In contrast, a life care retirement community would provide at least some level of supervision and on-site resource to assist monitoring and evaluating the safety of the residents as they age over time. And according to the National Fire Protection Association, older adults represent about 13% of the population, but 30% of all fatal fire victims. And so this was their comments. Now, also, this portion of our community is expected to grow in the future, and it is essential that the facilities provide for at-risk population are configured with future residents and their safety in mind. And this district would also allow the density of the development to be calculated on the gross acreage of the tract. This term, gross acreage, gross tract, was inadvertently excluded from the original draft version, and that's why you are hearing it again tonight, sent from the Community and Economic Development Committee to the board. The applicant believes that this wording is critical to the text amendment and to his project, for it will allow for the full use of the land while still preserving the areas that are determined to be conservation areas. Currently, density is calculated as allocated density in all the zoning districts permitting residential units except the RDA-1, Development Area 1, Boswell Corner, and the UD Urban Development District. Allocated density is calculated on the remaining land after excluding acreage of wetlands, floodplains, and slopes greater than 35% of the gross area. If adopted, the proposed R5 zoning district could be applied to many areas of the county's urban service area. And staff notes that the comprehensive plan does contemplate development densities only as high as 12 dwelling units per acre in the targeted growth area. And should this amendment proceed to the board and they decide to create it, staff does suggest that consideration should be made for an amendment to the comprehensive plan to accommodate this style of development. And proposed ordinance 1708 would provide the regulations for signs in the R5 district also, which would be identical to the sign regulations for the agricultural and residential zoning districts in the county. On March 22, 2017, the Planning Commission acted on a version of this proposed amendment that allowed only 12 dwelling units per acre and did not specify the density would be calculated on the gross tract acreage instead of allocated density. The text amendment referred to the board was not the same as the request originally sent from the CEDC, as I stated earlier, and the CEDC considered this text amendment at its meeting at November 2016 and voted 3-0 to send the matter to the full board for consideration. This was discovered by the applicant after the Planning Commission public hearing and prior to the board's scheduled public hearing on April 18th. The original request included the density of 24 dwelling units for the gross tract, and due to this omission, the board voted May 16th to resend the original request back to the Planning Commission for your consideration. And staff recommends approval of this proposed ordinance. And this ordinance you may make recommendations to, but you cannot make changes.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. Any questions for our staff? Seeing none, we will open up the public hearing. As I've said several times this evening, 3 minutes, come up, state your name and your address. When you see the yellow light, you have 1 minute. When you see the red light, time is up, and we ask you to wrap up your comments. Well, come on down, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Steve Hunley. I'm the Community Plans and Liaison Officer for Marine Corps Base Quantico, and I'm primarily here to answer any questions you might have about the military impact area and incompatible land uses. But I also want to take this opportunity on behalf of Colonel Murray, who's the base commander, to thank the planning staff and the Planning Commission for considering the concerns of Marine Corps Base Quantico as it relates to this rezoning, consistent with the Joint Land Use Study and the county's comprehensive plan. By excluding the age-restricted housing zoning from military impact areas. As you know, this type of land use, along with some other uses, are incompatible with sudden impact noise and vibrations that can emerge from military training areas. Also, I thought today's report in the Freelance Star was very timely in consideration of this, talking about the population forecast for Stafford County. It's going to be 30% increase by 2040, and most significantly for this amendment, The article noted that 65 and older projected to double by 2030. So this is not only a good amendment for Stafford County, it'll help keep Marine Corps Base Quantico a viable training base into the future. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you do at Quantico.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I'm going to turn the gavel over to Ms. Vanucci.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. What's the will of the commission?
Ms. Vanucci, I would like to make a motion for approval of 017-08.
Okay, so we have a motion for approval of O-108. Do we have any seconds?
Second.
Mr. Rhodes seconds. Mr. Cohen, do you have any comments?
Yeah, it's just one, as Ms. Blackburn very nicely articulated, we can't change it and whatnot, but just a couple of things that first of all, my notation would be, and other people can say whether or not they have dissenting opinions, but my notation would be that to make sure that other applicants, other individuals, other legal spokespeople understand that this type increased density is for this category because of the particulars that this type of senior dwellings would have as an impact to the county versus other types of zoning categories. So that's why this category, being seniors, is different. I also, just as one of the many reasons before this, since we last took this up, have spoken with numerous people who are interested in moving into this type of facility or apartment complex. And their mindset is that they no longer want a full-fledged house, but they are not at a certain point in their life where they need to be in a Falls Hill or Falls Run facility, that they want something in between. And so that this type of apartment would address those people that are 50s, 60s, 70s-ish in that situation. And as a CUP in this, if there was an applicant wanted to make it an assisted living, could be done by a CUP, and our fire marshal would be very happy with that aspect because that would meet all their demands. And if this is, as the many people who are talking about this are saying that it's mainly apartments, then it really doesn't fit what the concerns are with the fire marshal, because they're not talking about people in wheelchairs and in that situation. So I think the way this is being thought of, both by people who want to do it as well as the people who want to live in it, it fits into a niche that is needed, as the gentleman from Quantico pointed out, is needed in our population.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Rhodes? Any other members of the commission want to comment? Okay, so we get to vote now. I swear I pushed the button. Okay. Okay, motion passes 6-1. There you go, Mr. Cohen.
All right, Mr. Harvey, we move onward. Thank you, Mr. Janney, for all your work. Now we move on to any unfinished business. We have no unfinished business. Any new business? We have none. So now we move to the planning director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few things to note tonight. One is a name change for two of the committees from the commission, one dealing with parking and drive aisles, the other dealing with landscaping. There's been some question about the term committee. It's recommended that the commission start using subcommittee because the Board of Supervisors has some committees, and they were concerned that there might be some confusion amongst the public as to who's doing what. So that was the recommendation, that you all adopt your names as subcommittees. The second item I had was a...
Ms. Vanucci, did you want to say something?
Why is the sign committee so special? I'm just kidding. It was a joke.
And, Mr. Chairman, well, bring to the Planning Commission's attention that the board has referred a zoning text amendment to the Planning Commission for consideration. It would allow modifications to the PD2 zoning category, which would allow people that had parcels that were less than 500 acres to apply to the PD2 zone and have that attached to and become part of a larger PD2 project. As you may recall, that zoning category is designed to create a neo-traditional type community, and as such, it's very large in scale, between 500 and 850 acres. We only currently have one in the county right now, and that's the Embry Mill project. There's a proposal for the adjacent Ebenezer Church to do an expansion, and they would like to acquire some land as part of the Embry Mill project. In doing so, they also need to rezone their property to allow less open space requirements so they can fully build their proposed expansion. This combination of events requires a code amendment. That's what's being referred to you. Staff would recommend the commission consider authorizing a public hearing tonight for your August meeting.
All right, Mr. Harvey. I know one member will be away during the August meeting, correct? No, okay. So I don't think anybody will be away during the August meeting, so are we all right with a public hearing in August on this? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rhodes, second by Boswell, quickly, right before Ms. Finucci. Any other discussion? Okay, we will vote. We no longer say tally the votes. And it passes unanimously. Mr. Harvey, do we have to formally take anything action, or do I just have to say we now change the names of those committees?
Mr. Chairman, it's at your discretion.
Oh, the power. Then I will formally say that we are changing the names of the committee to subcommittees.
I object.
We'll have to have a vote then? Okay.
And,
All right, go ahead, Mr.
Chairman,
Harvey.
A couple other updates for the Planning Commission. At the last Board of Supervisors meeting, the board approved the Cool Springs mini storage rezoning application. As you recall, that was a leftover piece of A1 zone property off of Cool Springs Road, and it went to the light industrial classification. The board also approved the Winding Creek project for rezoning and a conditional use permit for 97 more houses in that general area of the county. Then also approved the Falmouth Village commercial project. And the chairman asked me to address the commission regarding a newspaper article in today's Freelance Star, specifically dealing with population growth. I don't know if you may or may not have seen the article today, but it looked at new Weldon Cooper Center projections. Weldon Cooper Center is associated with University of Virginia, and they do projections for growth. The chairman wanted me to compare that with our growth projections in our comprehensive plan. I'd say in general, we are very close in numbers. Looking at the year 2020, there's just around a 2,000 person difference, which equating to dwelling units is probably less than 700. And it's between a 1% and 2% difference overall in numbers. When you project out to 2040, I should say, Weldon Cooper projects out to 2040. We don't go that far, but when we look at the farthest we match up with numbers, 2035, we're less than 2,000 population difference. So Weldon Cooper has dialed back their projections for growth in the state, as well as Stafford County, and they are tracking very closely to what our comprehensive plan is projecting.
So in effect, the ZURAF method is pretty much close to even what the latest numbers from them are.
Yes, and
Let Mr. ZURAF know it's duly noted.
I will pass it along. Some things that staff would like to note for the commission is they compared Stafford County to Newport News and Alexandria, and those two jurisdictions are much smaller in size or very more urbanized. It was saying how we will be at the same population level as they are, but we definitely won't look the same. We're definitely a different place than those two locations are.
And wouldn't Alexandria, being a city, have far different regulations than we're allowed to do?
Yes, they have an urban form of government. So with Stafford, we will continue to be suburban in scale, but we'll have some urbanized areas and also some rural areas, hopefully based on what we've planned for in our comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Thank you for getting on that so quickly this morning.
And that concludes my report.
All right. County Attorney?
I have no report at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Committee reports, sign ordinance committee.
Mr. Boswell, I'll handle this one if Mr. Boswell was not able to attend that meeting. We did meet on June 15th, and we just continue to review our sign ordinance in comparison with other jurisdictions. We hope to have everything wrapped up maybe in 2 more meetings, so by September, we should be finished, we hope.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bailey and Mr. Boswell. So now we move to the parking and drive aisle standards subcommittee.
We actually had our June 26th meeting this week and took care of reviewing all of the jurisdictions, neighboring jurisdictions, and likewise counties' parking and drive aisle standards. Staff is working on a comprehensive list of comparison for us to be able to hold another public meeting with more public insight right before the August Planning Commission meeting. August 12th, I think. Is that correct? 9th? August 9th? Okay.
That's what they told us.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't go at the same time.
Oh, we got that time slot
Yes,
before
did.
you guys?
You got the time slot before we did.
Oh.
All right, and the landscaping standards subcommittee, Mr. English, you want to start?
Yeah, we met this evening at 4 o'clock, and we had a long list of things for staff to help look at in reference to some changes in the landscaping. Don't think it's going to be a whole lot, but just a few issues that we're going to come across to address.
All right. Thank you. As far as chairman's report, I don't have anything to report, thanks to Mr. Harvey being wonderful and taking care of it from today's paper. TRC, we have one on July 12th, actually 3, Embry Mill, Kellogg Mill, and North Stafford Office Complex. And I believe everybody got their bundles of joy already. So now we move
Make a
to
motion for
Michael
approval of
Rhodes.
October
Second.
26 minutes.
Speaks quickly part of the meeting. Mr. Rhodes has moved for approval of the April 26th meeting minutes, and he has been seconded by Ms. Vanucci. All of those in favor will vote accordingly. Okay, come on, Rhodes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval of May 10th minutes.
May 10th was a motion made by Mr. Rhodes, seconded by Mr. Boswell. Any comments?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we now proceed to vote. All right, and that passes
Mr. Chairman, I make a
unanimously.
motion for approval of May 24th minutes.
And Mr. Rhodes, followed by Mr. English. Any comments? Seeing none, and we vote. Okay, Mr. Boswell abstained because he was unable to attend that meeting, if memory serves me correctly. That's correct. My only parting before we adjourn, remind everyone of the 4th of July weekend coming up, and then July 15th, we have the awards, the memorial being dedicated for our veterans and families of veterans. And Mr. Harvey's waving at me.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There's one other item I wanted to bring to the commission's attention. Ms. Stinnett has reminded me that we've had a change in scheduling. Some applications we thought might move forward to public hearing for your July 12th meeting have not been able to be completed and be put in a posture for a hearing. So we have no scheduled hearings or scheduled business for that July 12th meeting.
All right, if I hear some individuals saying it's acceptable, I know one member will be away, so that.
For July 12th.
For July 12th, so therefore, and that's my prerogative, I can make that decision, right? All right, so I hereby cancel the July 12th meeting, so we will be like the Board of Supervisors and not meet again until August. I know, really. 2 things tonight. All right, and so without any other hands waving at me, we are adjourned until August. Have a healthy, safe summer.